Under a minute remaining. Pacers clinging to a 5-point lead. Haliburton tries another three. Bang! Tyrese Haliburton from downtown. Timeout Bucks. It's an 8-point lead.
What is up, Pacers Nation? You are listening to the Pacers Post Up, brought to you by the brothers of basketball, Brad and Ryan. What a shot. What a game, what a run for Tyrese Haliburton and the Indiana Pacers. We are talking all things NBA in-season tournament, from the knockout round against Boston to the trip out to Vegas, the Bucks, the Lakers, the TNT ESPN crossover coverage. You name it, we've got it, and we're going to be breaking it down here over the next hour or so. So stay tuned. Be sure to check us out on all of our social media channels for exclusive Pacers content. You're listening to the Pacers Post Up. All right, we are here today to discuss the in-season tournament. Ryan and I just returned from Las Vegas last week after quite an interesting and fun experience. So really we just want to dive in and talk about kind of all the details of the trip. Obviously the first time going through all this. Really want to kind of dissect the Boston game, the Bucks game, how things went in the championship, overall experience, etc. So without further ado, Ryan, you want to kind of dive into it?
Yeah, so obviously there is a ton to talk about in the in-season tournament, but Brad, I'd like to know, what are just your early thoughts on it?
Well, I'll tell you what, we were at the first game. Obviously the court's a little bit of a shocker to see. It was almost kind of like watching a video game, the players going across the blue surface, and we were kind of seated at the baseline on that game. So I think if I'm going to summarize it in a couple of words or phrases, it worked. I think the NBA should pat themselves on the back. This was a risk, and I think it paid off. Certainly for the Pacers, it paid off in droves, but for the league in general, to create meaningful games in November and December, there were some misses here or there, but as a fan, I think it was phenomenal.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I would say, I think when it first came out, there was, and I was probably part of this group, everybody was a little skeptical. An in-season tournament, are the players going to care? And truthfully, that was what was kind of awesome. One of the points I wanted to hit on, one of my favorite things is, and this isn't even just associated with Vegas, but it was really fun in the NBA to have two nights, Tuesdays and Fridays when they played these games where if they were healthy, everybody was playing. I mean, we had a Bucks game this year where Damian Lillard sat. It's obviously a frustration across the league. So they created an atmosphere where, Friday night you'd come back and you'd look and, if the Suns were playing the Celtics or something, you knew whoever could play would play. So I think it drawed some attention there, got players playing. And obviously, I mean, we got to go to Vegas and have an awesome trip, which we will dive into.
Yeah, you're hitting the nail on the head. I mean, I think that's what they were trying to accomplish. Some local radio folks here in Indianapolis, and I'm going to forget his name, brought one of the guys who was kind of the head behind all this. And, if I can clean it up, I'll put his name in the notes or something like that. But it was really interesting to hear him talk about it and talk about how long this has been in the works, like more than a couple of years. This is like 10 years in the making for the NBA trying to pull something like this off and have it look different, feel different. The players, like you said, were going to play. You could tell, for all the home games, we were there, or at least I was there. I don't want to speak for you. I think you were at most. Watched all the away games. I mean, that Atlanta game just sticks out in my mind as one of the most fun. It was like they couldn't miss down the stretch, sure. Fireworks galore. So it was absolutely a success and capped off by a really cool experience in Vegas. So I think we should probably kind of, dive in here and talk about how we got to Vegas, what allowed us to get there, which was kind of a cool story. And then, just sort of the experience there for the first run at this championship on a neutral site.
Yeah, so I think the first thing to hit on is how we made it to Vegas was first beating all the top teams in the East, really. So, in our group, we had the 76ers, we had the Cavs, and we beat both of them and then went on to beat Boston. I think that's kind of the game we want to jump in on, I'd assume, because we were both in the building. And I was going to ask you, Brad, of a regular season game, where does this rank of one of your favorites being in that Boston arena?
So anytime it's, Boston's the number one seed in the East right now. So anytime you get a number one seed in your building, I think it has a little bit of a different feel. But this took it to another level. I would tell you some of the players. I think Miles said, it's the best the building sounded in 4 or 5 years. I would agree with him and say, for me, it's really all about how are you feeling? I mean, you're sitting in your seat, but you're literally jumping out of your seat every play in that fourth quarter. And to have, some of the back and forth that you had, Jason Tatum did have a good run there in the fourth. He was hitting a lot of jumpers, just felt like, getting to the foul line, things like that. And to see us, I guess two things, our offense, we've seen all the accolades. I think they ran through them, this last week. Number one in pace, number one in, points scored, et cetera. I mean, number one in a million different things. It was really our defense that got the crowd involved. Getting those playoff type, stops when you needed them is what made the roof blow off. And we got a turnover towards the end that kind of led to a fast break dunk by Nesmith, and that really sort of felt like it wasn't quite over. We had some free throws to hit, but that blew the lid off the building. And you could see the bench, exploded onto the floor, and Boston hit the quick timeout. It was awesome. I think it looked different, felt different, and to have that kind of action, on December whatever it was, 5th, was pretty cool. I mean, we were there together. I would assume you felt the same.
Yeah. And one thing I can say on that, being, of one concern, I guess, of having the top offense in the league is when you get into the playoffs, the game always slows down and you get a lot more isolation ball. We saw that a lot with Tatum and Brown, who were just basically isoing, whether it was Nesmith, Buddy, whoever was drawing that assignment. And so one of my fears is when that game slows down, are we going to be able to still produce the offense we have? And then obviously the thing you hear everywhere is, are we going to be able to defend? And Nesmith really battled Tatum at the end of that game. I was really impressed. Tatum's going to get his, so did Brown. But you could really just tell, and even just throughout the tournament, just when it slowed down, we had a little bit more of that. And maybe this is even a comment on maybe our team defense needs a little bit more work, because I was actually kind of impressed. I mean, as impressed as we can be with this team defensively, just on some of those isolation heavy or just man on man where we got to lock up this possession. And it was good to see it against a team who could expose our weaknesses, which I know we'll get into when we get into the Lakers game when we talk about size and stuff like that. But it was awesome to see just how we could handle that. And then, it's just cool to be in the arena. I was trying to think back some of my favorite games regular season wise that stood out. And the two I wrote down was Lance Stevens' return for obvious reasons. And then the other one was Vic's return. So they both had people coming back, which were fun. But this was a totally different atmosphere. I love the towels. Kind of felt like we were at a Steelers game, which was awesome.
Yeah.
But it added a little effect. We were in the building for the Gold Swagger days and all that. So it's the first time in recent memory where we had anything like that. So the building was juiced. We were, pumped. We were obviously, after the game, we were sitting up in the nosebleeds, legitimately looking up flights for Vegas because we had not booked anything yet. So it was definitely unique. At least we were lucky enough to be able to kind of have that on the back burner and know we were going. So if we want to, Brad, that might be a good time. Oh, you want to jump in?
Yeah, just one quick thing, because you kind of hit on something that I think is worth mentioning. The way that you kind of know, or at least what I enjoyed about the building, was you knew it's Boston. So there's Celtics fans in the arena.
Yep.
You did not really feel that. I felt like it was a really good showing by our fan base. I've been to far too many games where, whether it's the Lakers or the Knicks or the Nets or, insert team that's in a big market, Bulls is one, where you hear that contingent in the crowd, and that really was not there at that Celtics game. And I think that speaks to where this team is at and where this fan base is at, and we can talk about this in the context of Vegas, but, it was a sellout for the viewing party for the championship at the IST. So we'll touch on some of that. And I do think, that was so fun. We're literally watching the win, and the first thing we do, we have an usher come up to our seat and said, "Hey, move along," because we're looking at flights and trying to book stuff for Vegas. So I know you had kind of a fun route to getting there. I don't know if you want to share how you were able to pull that off.
So didn't quite have the funds to make the Vegas trip work, but was able to put kind of a hedge bet in. So basically on the Boston game, I put a couple $100 down on us money line in order to fund that trip, and then double down on the Bucks game to continue the funds. So it was kind of unique to actually be gambling on a trip, because if it hits, I've got the money to go. If it doesn't, we're staying in Indy. So obviously turned out great. But yeah.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun, and we booked it open-ended. I think that's worth mentioning. We booked a one-way ticket out, not knowing exactly how it was going to go out. So I think, let's kind of dive into Vegas and what that was set up like. I think, it was really cool for me. I have been very fortunate to, I guess fortunate or unfortunate, depending upon how you look at it. I've been to Vegas a lot in my life for a variety of reasons. And one of the first things that I noticed, that felt different about this trip was we're driving down the strip. Our flight landed late. I can't remember what time it was, Vegas time, maybe 8 or 9 o'clock. Yeah. It was already dark, and we were going to find a place to eat and check out the Sphere. And it felt like every, digital billboard on all different properties, Aria, MGM, you name it, was all lit up with NBA in-season tournament, advertising. And they had pictures of Haliburton and Giannis, LeBron, Zion, etc., kind of building it up locally. And Vegas is always, I know the Raiders are there, and that's been a recent thing. And the Knights obviously have a strong following. They've been one of the best teams in the NHL the last couple of years. But it's always kind of been a mixed bag as far as sports fandom. You see a little bit of everything out there, when you're in the sports books. And it was cool to see, kind of the attention turn to the NBA. I've not attended Summer League, but I have to imagine it's a similar feel when they go out there. But it was obvious from the jump, so to speak, that the in-season tournament was there, and they were going to do it right, which I think they did. So that was what jumped out to me at first. I don't know if you had a similar sentiment.
I could just say the thing that jumped out to me was, and I kind of told you this while we were there, I had a lot of fun just walking around, and, you'd see there were more Pacer fans than I actually imagined being down there at the time. And this is something that maybe a larger team like the Lakers, if you're walking down the street and see a Lakers fan, you're probably not going to stop. But, I mean, we probably talked to every single Pacer fan we passed, or at least we're fist bumping or, talk about, did you come in? Yeah, when are you leaving? We don't know yet. It was a lot of that. And it was like, let's just keep winning. So that's kind of unique where, you go somewhere and then you've got a small group of people who are all, combining. And truthfully, Vegas, like I said, I think this is, at least in my head, the first real NBA event. The Summer League's kind of its own thing. So to kind of have the energy, I love Vegas. So I think they did a killer job, and we're going to kind of talk about here, I think, just kind of that experience outside the stadium and then start hitting on the games, unless you had something else.
No, I think that's a perfect spot to kind of dive into. So we got there on Wednesday night late, like I said, and then woke up, and it was kind of interesting. And this is something that I guess if I want to nitpick, it was interesting to have a 2:00 tip-off for that first game. Obviously, it was a Thursday, so it's the middle of the day in Vegas, 2 p.m. A lot of people probably still working, etc. 5 p.m. Eastern, and it was the Eastern semi, Pacers Bucks to kick it off. So I thought that was for the national attention and for the local resident appeal. I think that was a bit of a miss. Mm-hmm. For us, it was great.
I was literally going to say, for us, it worked out perfect. I had friends at home who I'm like texting and be like, hey, check out the TV, because their TNT crews and ESPN crews were all there, and we were kind of hanging out in the back, and it was just like, well, I'm not home from work yet. And it's like, I get it. I mean, the coverage would have started at 4 here. Yeah. So I think from what I've heard just in the media, that will probably be changed there. I know that, I mean, obviously this was kind of their first attempt at all this, so nobody's going to get everything perfect. But my gut tells me there's a few changes probably coming with the IST, whether it's maybe even a playoff bid if you win or something like that.
Yeah,
but
I've seen some of that already.
The timing of the games, especially when you get two East Coast teams, it's just, it didn't totally make sense. But it was awesome for us because we didn't really have that awkward period where we're just kind of waiting for it, because this whole trip we kind of booked around was this. So we got to go right there, and then the whole area they had set out there was really cool. If you want to go in and kind of describe everything they had set up.
Yeah, I think the coolest thing for me is when you walked over there. I was there in the morning, walking by just to kind of check it out, and they had it all sort of fenced off security wise. So the only fans that they were letting into this in-season tournament experience area, which was all set up right outside T-Mobile Arena, it was for fans only, ticket holders only. So you had to be media personnel, team personnel, or a ticket holder to go in this area. So it wasn't, and the beauty of it was not overcrowded. Correct. You were able to go in and check out all the different things that they had, from merch to the ESPN and TNT crews both being set up there side by side was really cool because you saw the personalities coming in and out, able to get pictures. They were interacting with the crowd, which I thought was cool. And then they had the big stage area set up that, kind of served as sort of the pregame entertainment, if you will. I guess it was pregame to the second game. Yep. It wasn't going on while we were there, but they had different, they had bars set up. They had this NBA ID through the NBA events pass type thing where it was like this kind of contest where you could go earn free spins to get ticket upgrades, free merchandise, whatever. But it wasn't overcrowded. That was the beauty of it. Sometimes I feel like I've been to sporting events where you're trying to be involved with the outside festivities, if you will, but it's like, sardine central. So I felt like it was really well done and you were able to get the full experience. I was a huge fan of it. Yeah, we got pulled over, asked to be on television, yep. Which was kind of cool from an ESPN perspective. So I don't know if you have anything to add, but I thought it was really nice to have it kind of exclusive for those of us going to the game.
Yeah, definitely. I'm not a huge crowd person in that sense. So when you were standing behind, if you watch any of the broadcasts, they kind of pan over the crowd. It's not like you were fighting people to get spots. Everybody had a little room, could breathe, and it made it nice for all the things, the hoops they had set up and the little games they could do. That's not typically our personal style, but it was still just kind of a cool energy thing. And I think definitely the coolest part was having ESPN and TNT there. Yeah. Interacting. I think that's one of the first times. I know ESPN's doing a lot of new stuff now and going through a lot of changes, but I think that's the first time they got there. So when we get there, we're about an hour and a half before tip. So they're setting everything up and Stephen A's coming out and you kind of, I would say, get like a 15-second interaction because they like to have fun. And then, so we go in, we listen to their broadcasts. And then when we come out of the game, it's TNT and they're interviewing Tyrese. So it was just cool to kind of, you get both sides of it and they're kind of throwing. And so one of the things I wanted to float to you was, the Pacers obviously got to do a lot more media that they're used to. So I wanted to see what maybe was one of your favorite moments there, a couple favorite.
Well, the one that sticks out to me, and I hope everybody that's a Pacers fan got to see this, is, Miles is kind of an eclectic individual, and he had a couple of sound bites, but the one that stuck out to me is, we don't have a lot of Hollywood guys in this locker room. That's what he said. And you can see Tyrese is kind of cheesing. He's giving him a little bit of a grin and Miles' point in saying that was he feels like we're a reflection, that team is a reflection of the city that we're in, right? That they're a reflection of Indianapolis, blue collar, hard workers, which I think is spot on, but the soundbite is Tyrese goes, not a lot of Hollywood guys coming from a guy wearing a suit with no shirt. So I did enjoy that, and unfortunately, that was a post Bucks game soundbite, and so Hollywood stuck it to us a little bit after that, but that was probably one of my favorites. There was some stuff on TNT too. I don't know. I mean, what for you? What did you like throughout that experience?
I love listening to Miles. So the other Miles one we have to point out is he doesn't play with Legos. He builds Legos, which was just a top tier Miles moment. And I think he loved to talk about it. He even doubled down, I think, on Instagram today. We're actually recording this on the 14th of December. But he doubled down and showed his wall. He's got like the Titanic, the Death Star, all these things. And he's talking about building. He does like 120,000 pieces since the season started. So wow. You get to kind of see his unique, but then a couple other ones that I thought were funny. Shaq is obviously always hilarious and was interviewing Tyrese after the game on the TNT set and accidentally called him Trae Young. and he was saying his excuse was the damn cannabis behind him out in Vegas.
It was there.
Oh yeah,
it was in the air. You could smell it. And not to pick on Shaq, but man, when they threw him up on the jumbotron on Saturday, it looked like he was a full participant in the cannabis during the championship game. There was one other one that I really liked. And this just speaks to some of the fun with the ESPN and TNT crossover. And you saw some of it before the East semifinal, before our Pacers, game on Thursday. Ernie had come over to the ESPN booth, and they were the ones kicking off the ESPN. That is, was the ones kicking off the coverage. But they had some crossover live after the game, and they were talking about the Pacers and just how, and I'm saying this because it's something I want to touch on here later, saying how, Tyrese this is his coming out party. He's trying to recruit guys to Indiana. And Chuck was talking to Stephen A on the kind of crossover coverage and said, he just got an update from Woj or somebody that James Harden wants to be traded to Indiana. Tyrese is so good now that he wants to make it over to Indiana, which obviously is a joke, and I wouldn't want him even if he did want to come to Indiana. But it's kind of a little subtle jab, and that was some of the fun. Just the crews going back and forth. It's obviously people you see all the time, and I'm probably a little partial to the TNT guys.
I think most people are.
Yeah, but Stephen A. Does a solid job, and Wilbon was there.
Yep.
Who else did they have? Woj was there for a little bit, and then Bob Myers?
Yeah,
former Warriors GM that's now on the ESPN broadcast, doing a good job for him in that role, I think. So, it was. I'll say this, like I said at the beginning, I felt like they did it right. It felt different. It was a really unique experience, and one that I think, from a fan perspective, I would certainly want to go back. It would have me wanting to come back and kind of taste that again. Frankly, even if it wasn't the Pacers that were there, it was cool enough for me as an NBA fan to say, yeah, I could make this a trip, on an annual basis. So, anything else to add before we kind of get into the game itself? Because I know there's a lot to unpack there.
The only thing I would say is just I thought it was a lot of fun to be part of the media, actually have our team. I think it's a little overblown here in Indy. The thing is, nobody talks about us in the national media, when the truth is they're only talking about the Lakers, the Knicks, the Heat, those teams anyway. So if you're not in a finite bubble, you're not getting talked about anyway. So it was just kind of cool, and I think we've got a lot of unique personalities who kind of gotten – Tyrese was on the KG podcast. Miles was doing a lot of interviews. It was just cool to see our guys kind of get, and I think they enjoyed that, and getting some time in the media and just showing off personalities and having fun. But let's definitely get into this Bucks game, I'd assume. Let's talk about first just the difference in atmospheres from, you could even say, the Boston game or the Laker game compared to this one, because the vibe in the building was very quiet.
Yeah, it was. The first game, so the semifinal game, again, remember, we bought our tickets basically the night after we beat Boston. And so we were late to the party and ended up getting some seats in the upper level. For those that are familiar with, Gainbridge Fieldhouse, the lower club and balcony, this was just a 2-level arena. So we were in the upper deck, fine seats, but it literally felt like you could talk to the players during the game. That's how quiet it was. We were, I go to a lot of Pacers games, Ryan. I know you do too. I pretty much know at about the 20-minute mark before tip, the players are going to be out on the courts. The Pacemates are out doing their dance. The energy in the building starts to pick up. They put the videos on the jumbotron. This place was Deadsville. I mean, there were not people in the stands, really, by and large. I bet it was 25% full. 10 minutes before tip-off. And it was pretty clear that it was going to have a different feel when the game started from a fan perspective. And that, I think it has to be tough for the players. I can't imagine getting up, trying to get yourself up for a big game.
And then having the building be completely silent, because it was kind of like you hit it on. I mean, we just kept looking around being like, all right, when is this place going to start to fill up? And then all of a sudden tip's going, and it's like, if you were a heckler, this was the game for you, because
100%.
you could have talked to anybody in the stadium, let alone the players. I mean, I could have shouted to the other people on the other side, and we could have had a full-blown conversation. One of the things we thought was really funny is when we get intense, we are not always the cleanest group, to say the least. And so, when Tyrese hits a huge three, I mean, we're getting up, let's fucking go. And we might as well just be screaming to ourselves. But I mean, there are people around, I actually expected it, not doing this the first game. I actually thought it'd be a pretty heavy Bucks crowd going into the game. So
maybe a little more back and forth with the fans.
And I expected there just to be more people in general. And honestly, I don't even think it's a hate on the game. It was kind of a unique, fun experience to kind of be part of it, because I'm sure, especially if you sat lower, you could have really, heard the coaches.
If we had the same, so the seats we had for the championship game were lower level, about 12 rows up, and I would say, if we had those seats in the first game, we would have been talking to the players. Yeah. I mean, the And I don't want to make it sound like we're obnoxious. I don't think we are. There were not kids around us. You always got to be on the lookout for that. But the people behind us, I think, they did move at one point. We were very passionate about the Pacers' level of play. And frankly, I heard a soundbite from Aaron Neesmith on one of the local guys. I think may have been JMV's show here in Indy, but he was talking to Aaron, or whoever it was talking to Aaron, and asked him about it, because there were reports after Thursday when they were doing the coverage on Friday that, hey, it was a little bit of a quiet arena. Yep. And Aaron said, you just have to, you got to kind of create that energy within yourself. Obviously, it's to date on the game day, it was the most important game of the season. And some of the, if we kind of dive into the game, set aside the fan experience being a little awkward, it got better as the game went along, for sure. But what stood out to me really more than anything was some of what we were talking about from a defensive perspective. We were able to get stops again, and I that's coming to mind because I'm mentioning Neesmith. I felt like he really did a good job wearing on Giannis. It wasn't just him. We've employed an approach with throwing a lot of different bodies at him and this, that, and the other. And Ryan already told you we're recording this on the 14th, so he
just went off for 64.
Yeah, he did, and that was unfortunate. But
we've got his ball.
Yeah, we've got his game ball. Actually, I think it came out. That's just an aside that we actually took the alternate game ball. So the ball he was chasing down was in fact the wrong ball, and his security guard actually had the official game ball. So whatever. But, going back to the Vegas deal, we were able to stymie them enough. There were moments that third quarter, obviously, they pretty much had their way, but I don't know. How did you feel about the game? Because I didn't really ever feel comfortable until really the last, I'm going to say, minute of that game.
Well, I mean, it was kind of like the Boston game where it was just kind of a grunt fight where each team was taking a hit. I mean, we went into half. We never feel comfortable as a lead. I think as fans, we are always ones who think it's going to go as bad as possible. But we took it, and they came out and hit us hard. And we were going into that fourth, and we were just like, all right, we need a couple buckets. Found them where we could, and then held on. And then Tyrese did his thing.
Yeah. And that was really cool. I mean, I went back. When you're in the arena and you see that play, you're trying to pay attention to what's going on the floor, but you're so amped up and in the moment.
Oh, I missed it.
That you didn't. It was hard to catch, and so you go back and watch the ESPN coverage, and that was also cool because they had the crossover going. It was Mike Breen, Doris Burke from ESPN, and then Reggie Miller, obviously, hometown favorite here, but. It was, I don't want to make too big of a deal of this, but obviously it was, he does the Dame time celebration. And thinking about it, I kind of was doing some reflection afterwards. And so much of this in-season tournament for Tyrese has been about his ascension and coming out party. So, Ryan, I wanted to ask you, I mean, and this, I'm kind of putting you on the spot here, but I've got the answer. Going into this year, obviously Tyrese signed a 5-year extension. It won't kick in until next season, max extension. So he'll be 24 at the start of next year, and it'll run through, he'll be 29 at the end of it. So he's committing the bulk of his prime basketball years to us. What do you think going into the season? Bleacher Report does their top 50 rankings. Where do you think Tyrese was on that rankings going into the season?
I would have probably read this, but I definitely don't remember the exact spot because I want to say we probably only had one in the top 50 total.
We did. It was just Tyrese.
Yeah. I bet he was 26.
You're close. He was 33 on that list. So I went back and looked at that because I thought, listen, there's a couple of things that I think are worth dissecting around Tyrese and kind of this Boston, but Bucks game and where we were kind of, because that was really, we'll talk about the championship for sure, but he goes into the season at 33. The franchise has committed to him the most money that we've ever signed a player to. If you're a Pacers fan, we are almost, it's like the floor is lava with the luxury tax. We've been very hesitant, even though ownership keeps saying they're not afraid to do it. We don't historically do it. And he was the 33rd ranked player. And I get it. There's all kinds of different rankings or whatever, but I'm just using that as a benchmark. It was cool to see how this in-season tournament, particularly for Tyrese Haliburton and the Pacers, has changed the narrative.
Yep.
Because I went back and looked this week. Guess what he is ranked today?
In the Bleacher Report?
In the Bleacher Report rankings. They updated it on like December 8th or 9th.
I would bet he's at 7.
He's at 5.
There you go.
So anybody that told you they saw that coming, I think they're probably lying to you. He's ahead of guys like Durant, Steph, I can't remember. Yeah, LeBron. And I think LeBron maybe was 4. So it was Giannis, Shai. Yeah, he was ahead of LeBron. Yeah, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Joker, Embiid.
Yep.
And then Tyrese. So yeah, to me it was very eye opening because here's the challenge for us as a franchise. I think back to, and I'm sorry if I'm derailing us on topic here a little bit, but. Whether it was, you can go all the way back to Reggie. So Reggie was the combination of superstardom and actually being committed to being in Indiana. Mm-hmm. The next star we had was probably Jermaine O'Neal. The brawl kind of derailed that. He goes elsewhere. Danny Granger, he was here, but he never really reached that level of superstardom. He wasn't going to get us over the hump. Paul George, we know how that went. Obviously was here. Probably the best player we've ever had talent-wise. Mm-hmm. And didn't want to be here. Then we get Victor Oladipo, similar deal, didn't want to be here. The franchise took a bit of a risk. Yep. Number 33 going into the year, on that ranking sheet. And I'm excited that it's seemingly paying off. And I think the in-season tournament has had a big influence. I know I'm throwing a lot at, how do you agree with that? Do you feel the same way about where we're at now with Tyrese, given that it's literally we're just a quarter of the way into the season?
Yeah, I think you saw in a lot of the national media, really talking about Tyrese, some of them probably for the first time. You heard a lot of the term they like to say, he's now a bona fide superstar. He's that. Yeah. Or people will like to throw around top 10. And truth is, it's kind of fun to look at. So I actually just went to DraftKings and pulled up just what the top 10 MVP voting odds are right now. Because I hate to be the guy who's just like, oh, he's top 10, he's top 5. And then you're like, well, okay, let's actually look at the league and see. Right. And we've kind of already hit it. But if you look right now, he is 7th on the list in MVP voting behind Joker, Doncic, Embiid, Shea, Tatum, and Giannis. And I probably agree with that list. The next guys are KD, Edwards, Booker, Fox, Curry. So I think, any way you swing it, it's tough when you get guys like LeBron and Steph where Tyrese might be playing better right now than they are on a given night basis. Although when it comes down to it, I don't know if you could really put him. But, when we traded for Tyrese, I was in love. I thought we could get a 20 and 10 guy. If you would have told me we were talking top 10, and I legitimately believe he is top 10 and he's only 23. And if you want to talk offensively, we can talk top 5.
Yeah.
So
agreed.
It's pretty exciting, and it's one of those things where we kind of, KG and them kind of hit on this too in their podcast. It's small market and we've been duped before. I thought Vic was saying all the right stuff. He was here to say. Meanwhile, he's chirping with Miami boys. But, I kind of do believe Tyrese. I mean, he has, in front of the stand, things to say that dude is legitimately perfect. And, as lovable as could be, truly. For this city, too. And he seems, we've got going that he's a Midwest guy. He went to Iowa State, so it's...
From Wisconsin.
From Wisconsin, yeah. So we can hope, and it's like you said, we've got him under contract. I'd love to say that guarantees he's here for the next 5 years, but we have seen that play out very differently. But truthfully, it's on the front office. I think if they can bring in some, and we've already got some of those pieces hopefully in the building, but if you bring in the right guys, and I know we're going to be aggressive come this deadline, and the off season, we'll have a lot of flexibility. If you can put the right pieces around him, he can elevate everybody, which, as we've seen, right now I keep talking about Turner's our second best offensive player, at least statistically speaking, and we have the best offense in the league. I'm the biggest Turner supporter as there comes, but we can, that's pretty impressive.
Well, and I would piggyback kind of on what you're saying to tie it back to a point earlier. I know you mentioned the KG podcast, and we touched on earlier the idea around bringing, getting guys to come to Indy. That's always been our problem. I literally think David West is probably our top free agent signing in franchise history.
Correct.
And that's not a shot at David West, but there was some injury concern there. It was, yes, he was an all-star, but it was on the back half of his career. And to tie this Tyrese talk track into the in-season tournament at large, I think that's what this tournament gets me most excited about. This tournament is it's provided a platform to say, let's set aside, we're going to set up these national TV games, and guess what, Pacers, you're getting none of them, and that's been the narrative forever. And nobody wants to come to Indy because they want to promote their brand. Thank you, Paul George. There's always these reasons why players I guess there's always players that find a reason to not want to come to Indy. And the in-season tournament created a platform for us to say, or for any team to say, or player, you know what, I'm going to force you to pay attention. And now I think there was a stat that came across my Bleacher Report feed that Tyrese had the largest social media growth of any player, during the in-season tournament. And because media is so accessible, I think it stands to reason that, you can be a superstar in Indianapolis, particularly if you're winning, because you're going to get opportunities like this with the in-season tournament, playoffs, social media presence. Tyrese is getting on all these different player podcasts, and you don't need to be in LA or in New York or Miami to get on a podcast, and to be able to build some of that brand equity that all these guys, talk about. And I don't blame them. They've got a short window of time to capitalize on their brand. So I get it. But, I'll say one more point on this. Tyrese, in terms of both superstardom and what he's proven about getting national media exposure, but it's also his style of play.
For sure.
And he is so unselfish with how he plays. He's such a pass-first guy, even though he's still averaging 26 points or whatever it is a night. You'd be crazy not to think that, okay, in order for my brand to mean something, I have to be a good player.
Yeah.
So why not go play with somebody that's going to elevate me so that my brand is actually worth something in the NBA market or whatever. So I think there's all of that at play here, and I'm not trying to overplay it, but we don't get these opportunities as a franchise and a fan base very often. So you have to capitalize on them when they do come.
Yeah, and one point on that, and even if maybe you're a guy who, doesn't love to build a big brand. We see that with Joker right now, who could care less about the NBA media. But if you're just a guy who's basing what you make basically off of what you make in the NBA, your salary, why wouldn't you want to come here? We saw him get Miles Turner, got basically $60 million in a renegotiation extension.
Yeah.
I'm betting you right now Obi was traded for 2 second-rounders. He's at least looking at a decent contract. I would imagine he's probably going to be in that $10 to $12 million range would be my gut feel based on where we're at today. But before that, he was probably looking at a league minimum, and I think that's a lot to do with how Tyrese plays. If you look across the board, everybody's having a career year again for the second year. So it's one of those things where you come here, you can still be you. You're going to get your shots. Just look at Buddy. He is shooting all day long, which we want him to do. But, yeah, I just don't know why. It's just whether you can find the right guy who wants to come here. I know Tyrese is out there, quote-unquote recruiting. I watched a lot of him in the World Cup this year, and my favorite thing right now, not that there's any chance because he just signed the same contract, but It seems like Tyrese and Anthony Edwards are pretty close. That would be a dream come true, although the Timberwolves are looking pretty good right now.
They're top of the West right now. Yeah.
But it's just, his personality, there was a lot of guys there, Cam Johnson, Mikal Bridges, those types of guys, Austin Reeves, those guys who you never know. In today's NBA, we can wake up tomorrow and somebody's unhappy. I mean, it sounds like as of right now, Zach LaVine might have already played his last game with the Bulls, I heard today. So you just don't know who's going to be available. Not that I'm saying I think everybody's unanimous that we don't want LaVine on this squad.
No.
Not that I'm even a LaVine hater, but just it would make no sense at all. There's no reason not to be excited with Tyrese. We'll see how it all plays out. We'll just have to see who puts around him. Where were we at other than that?
Well, I think I think I'll put one more point on that. I guess two things. First is yes, the challenge for us now is we still have to go out and win games. That's the crazy part is that all of this stuff, is great and it has the feeling of a championship atmosphere. And I don't want to spend a ton of time dwelling on it, but we'll touch on it here in a second about the championship game and where we kind of missed, our opportunity there. But the cool thing is we had a game on Monday. Again, we're talking here on the 14th, and we had Pacers back in action, opportunity twofold, really. And
trap game.
Yeah, it was a trap game, and I don't want to talk too much about the Detroit game, but it was interesting to see some of the stuff that other teams were doing, whether it was a zone or it was literally trapping Tyrese and forcing him to pass it to, pass out of the double team or whatever it was. It's funny because the teams that go to what I think we will see going forward, the teams that make long runs in this tournament are going to get scouted harder because you're seeing playoff level type defense and scheming and adjustments and things like that happening in game. I mean, we were off to a hot start against Milwaukee. They played a zone the entire second half to try and force us. And Bruce Brown was huge. Andrew Nembhard was huge, operating in the middle of that zone. Miles hit some buckets, which is kind of his sweet spot in the mid range. So I think there's a lot to come of it, but I felt like Detroit was absolutely trying to do some of the stuff the Lakers did to us on Saturday night. And so with that, I think it makes sense to go into the Lakers game. The atmosphere during the championship was completely different than the semifinal, which was really cool. And I really appreciated how fan-centric it was. We were able to walk basically up to courtside before the game, take videos of the players, interact with some of the media personality, celebrities in the building that night.
Lance
Stevenson got a little time on the screen. Bobby Flay was on there.
Flava
Flav was on there. Floyd Mayweather, which I know you have some history. Maybe we'll touch on that. I think that's worth later. Its own episode, perhaps later down the road. So, it was a completely different atmosphere. Definitely felt like a championship game, and one that frankly, aside first play, Tyrese throws a pass to the corner. Buddy Hield knocks down a three. They come down and score. I think we were up 5-2.
Something like that, yeah.
And then it was the Lakers were in control. I never felt like we were playing at our speed or dictating the game in any way, shape, or form. We got pretty bullied, and we played their game, not ours.
Yeah, you kind of hit it. It should have been our radar. Like you said, we were basically standing down kind of, basically courtside for about 15, 20 minutes down there before the game. And Rui Hachimura just comes walking by us. And, the TV just won't do it justice. That dude is fucking huge.
Yeah.
And then comes an AD, and then comes LeBron, and then they're going to run Austin Reeves, who's a 6'6", 6'8". I don't know exactly what he's at.
Cam Reddish, Vanderbilt.
Yeah. And all these guys, and then you're looking around, it's like, all right, we're rolling Neesmith, Buddy Brown, and Tyrese is going to be, McConnell, yeah, exactly. So it was just one of those things. We know it. It's no secret. Woj dropped a Woj bomb, even though I don't really think it's even news at this point that we're looking for a two-way wing, clearly. I mean, that is the obvious hole if you could point at one thing on our team. And it would have helped in a game like this, but, I mean, you got to credit the Lakers. They were blitzing Tyrese, and, when you blitz Tyrese, he's going to make the right read, but it's one of those days we were not shooting particularly well. So even when we were reading it right at that point, which they created a lot of chaos with that, we'd kick to Miles, and we can kind of hit on him, who struggled badly in this game.
Well, with Miles, it's interesting interesting, and I'm not trying to pick on him, but he got into foul trouble early, and I feel like that has a tendency to derail him, particularly from a physicality standpoint. And then and again, I'm not picking on him, but when Miles is rattled when he second guesses his shot. He's got an open look in the corner, that corner three that we know he can hit. And I saw him do it 1 or 2 times in that game, and I just thought he's not there. And it wasn't just Miles. I mean, guys were missing shots. I think I don't have the box score in front of me. We shot less than 25% from 3. I know that. We got out rebounded like 55 to 32. Don't quote me on it. It's somewhere in that neighborhood. And we were just disrupted. The Tyrese was fine out of the trap. I don't think he had a ton of turnovers.
No, it wasn't like Vic when LeBron blitzed him back in the day.
Yeah, you're right. That's a good comparison because it was not like that. But it was once we got the ball to the middle and their defense was recovering. Basically that second trapper coming off of Ty, we just could not figure out what we wanted to do. And it wasn't always Miles that was there. No. We were running different guys off of screens and things, at that high at ball action. And then, if you're a 3-point shooting team and you don't make them pay for trapping it up top and double teaming, you're going to have a long night. And we did. We didn't get a lot of points in transition. They were owning the glass. I mean, AD goes 41-20 with 5 blocks. It was, it was really just a tough night from the jump. The interesting thing, and we kept saying this while we were there, as bad as we were playing, I was amazed how long we kept it close.
Yeah. It definitely felt like one of those games where we were hitting shots just to stay in it, waiting for them to make the run. We kept saying in the game, all right, we got to do something, and it never really felt like we strung 2 or 3 great possessions together with stops, and it always just kind of felt like, all right. It was even in the fourth when we cut it down. I think it was like 95, 92 or something at one point.
Yeah.
It was just like that was kind of the first time we kind of felt it, and then they hit their big run to end the fourth. And so it was just kind of one of those games, where we're trying, and I pulled up the box score, and as you were kind of mentioned, we were 10 of 41 from deep. Not that the 3 ball says it all, but if we hit a lot of threes, I bet you we win most of those games. So It's one of those things where, and they took us out of the rhythm, and I mean, I think AD had 20 boards and we had 32. So, I mean, AD was basically, and I would imagine a ton of those were offensive. Let's see, only 5 actually. That surprised me. But either way,
still, I mean, we probably didn't have but 10 or 12 offensive boards as a team would be my guess. So, it was. We did cut it close. I looked at this before we jumped on. It was like the 6-11 mark.
Yeah.
We cut it to 3, and it was a Miles Turner 3, and you kind of felt like, oh my goodness, we've hung around. If we
could
can
we backdoor into this
right? Have we hung around long enough to where we can go on a run? And Miles hits the 3, and they come right back down, and Reddish hits a corner 3 to go back up 6. And that corner 3 from Cam Reddish took them on a 13-0 run. And we didn't score for the next 3.5 minutes. And by that time, it was, LA was all but etched on the first NBA Cup. There was just not enough time, and we were out of sorts. So, brutal.
No.
Brutal for me.
Emotionally, I mean, you remember I left the building with probably about a minute left on the clock. I can't stomach LeBron, so did not want to be in the building to watch him, but credit to him when he turns it on, and he did. He clearly wanted to win that thing, and when he wants to win, he seems to find a way to always beat us. So it was a tough game in the moment. I got to sulk in the hotel room a little bit after. But now that we've had a little time to digest, I mean, the overall experience, I mean, we just kept looking at each other and saying, this is so much fun. I mean, it's such a different thing. Just as a basketball fan, it was the first game I'd ever got to go to that wasn't in the field house. So it was totally new. And to be with all the celebs and the energy, and I mean, just, Vegas's energy alone, it was awesome, even though we didn't get the cherry on top.
Yeah, I echo that 100%. I mean, for anybody listening to this, and the reason that we're spending time talking about this is it's worth an experience. If you're an NBA fan, whether the Pacers make it there again or never again, it's worth checking out. It was an elevated atmosphere. I thought Vegas, it's the perfect host city. I mean, it really is. Where T-Mobile Arena is located is sort of right in between New York, and Park MGM and the whole Aria complex. So there's trams, free monorails that run right up into that area. So you can stay at 15 different properties is my guess, and access the arena without having to walk or Uber or whatever. It was really well done. They had NBA personalities there. The Pacemates were there. The Lakers dancers were there. Boomer was on the floor. So they brought some ties back into to the fan base, the local fan base that made the trip out there, which I thought was really cool as well. I think, and I heard this again. One of the local guys here in Indianapolis, I think it was Kevin Bowen, may have said, how do you as a franchise, Pacers or any other NBA team, how do you get your fans out there? Do you make it? Do you make it part of the season ticket package? I think was his recommendation. Okay. I just want to get your thoughts, Ryan, on what does that look like in your mind? Because I think you and I are in agreement, and you mentioned this earlier. Every Pacers fan we saw, it was like seeing family out there. And I think particularly LA's a different story because it's 4 hours away. Everybody's an LA fan in Vegas, or a New York fan or whatever, because it's kind of a melting pot. Mm-hmm. But for some of the smaller market teams that will inevitably make the Final Four, how do you get their fan base there? I think we were lucky and kind of based on some of your betting, able to make it out there. But you'd love to see more hometown fans get out there. So you think you build it into a season ticket package? Do you offer some sort of opt-in,
win. I think one thing, and I think the league will even look at this, is the timing of the games. I think it's just really hard. And I mean, we kind of had it lucky. Our game was Monday night. We talked to some Bucks fans. Their game was Tuesday night.
Yeah,
so
that's right.
It's one of those things where it's hard. Like, you don't want to, if you're going there for the Pacers, let's say, and you're not just going for the NBA experience, which if you're just an NBA fan, I think it's worth it. But if you're going and you wanted to know, I think maybe there's a way that they play the games in early November and then give us like a week, even just a little bit of time, so you can, because I just think, for most people, it's hard to just uproot and go to Vegas on a whim. And so if they could do something like that timing-wise, that'd be awesome. Although I think you're onto something with the, if you had a season ticket package or opt-in. I think a bet I'll place every year now is for us to make that knockout round, so I can double down and always just kind of have that in the back pocket, so that if we win, I know I've got the money to go. Yeah,
I think it's smart. You got to figure out how to do it. The NBA or the individual franchises have to figure out how to make it more accessible. I like what you said, because again, all this it's made up. They just made this up. So it's not like any of this is set in stone. That knockout week, instead of having games on Monday and Tuesday, just do it a Tuesday, Thursday, and then have the tournament the following weekend. And I know it's a scheduling nightmare, I'm sure. They're trying to line this all up so that everybody plays the right number of games, and you've got TV coverage on certain nights, and that Friday night that wasn't in the in-season tournament felt like everybody in the league played. We were sitting there at the hotel watching, 10 different games going on. So I know that there are people much smarter than me that would have to go in and figure that out. But I do agree. Yeah, like you're a Bucks fan, you win on Tuesday, you got a game on Thursday in Vegas. Who's going to be able to drop that ball and jump, on it? That's a tough ask for a fan base. So I think those are all things that the league will hopefully take into consideration and start to work through. And I can tell you, I bought a 10-pack this year for our parents to go to games, because they always took us they had season tickets for years and took us, and I would have absolutely paid an extra $200 for hey, here's an opt-in or something, to that, so that at least it was on my radar. Maybe there's some travel packages offered or what have you. So excuse me, but Yeah, I think, the one thing, to kind of put a bow on the basketball deal, and you mentioned this, obviously we got exposed, size, length, physicality, looking for the two-way wing. I just want to touch on that briefly because I think it's almost a catch-22. And we talked about this a little bit before coming on the other day.
Hold up, Brad. We've got ours. We just signed him today.
Oh, yeah.
James Johnson's back.
That's right. James Johnson's back. I love the timing. Right after the kerfuffle in the hallway at the Bucks game, we signed James Johnson. I saw somebody posted on Twitter that they did a survey a couple years ago in the NBA of players who you would least want to fight.
Yeah.
And he garnered like 40% of the vote. He was the number one ranked player. So timing is a little interesting, but I don't mind it at all. We play the Bucks here in another couple of weeks. So
yeah.
But I think, the catch-22 that I'm referring to and just want to get your thoughts is, yes, we need a little bit more size. I love Obi Toppin. I love what he brings offensively. There's no doubt about it. But he is a high flyer. He's somebody that gets out in transition, runs his three-point shot. Well, I don't know what he's shooting this year, 33, 34%.
He's inching up. He's at 35 now.
Is he? Okay, yeah. So that's fine.
Yep.
I mean, for what he brings. But we're getting exposed defensively. And he just, for as athletic as he is vertically,
Slow-footed.
he's slow-footed. He cannot stay in front of even, Giannis just goes right by him, gets in foul trouble, et cetera. So the challenge for us is twofold. A, the rest of the league is looking for the same player.
And nobody's giving him up.
And if they're not, it's because they already have one.
Yeah.
Exactly. They already have the Brandon Ingram or insert whoever it is, Michael Porter Jr.
Anthony Edwards, they're all those. Yeah.
Right. The guys, they're so coveted that you're gonna be hard pressed to get a lot of movement from teams. We have a unique scenario where the Raptors have kind of just found this mediocrity where their players are aging, they're not really winning games, and you've got guys like Siakam and OG that are at least by Shams reported somewhat available. Mm-hmm. I really think that's almost as good as it gets for us. I don't want to sell us short, but I think if you're able to land one of those two, the challenge I see is Siakam shooting like 20% from three this year.
Yeah.
And that's not, even though he's a career 30 plus, that's just not going to work in our system. I don't care. He's got to, that can't happen. And the timeline is he's more on the buddy age spectrum timeline, if you will. So I think OG's probably more of a, probably a better fit. I don't know how I don't know. I just don't know how many guys are out there. So unless you're going to draft somebody, and God love him, Jarris Walker is kind of who we drafted to fill that role.
He's in theory, yeah.
But he's raw. I mean, you saw it, and again, we're bouncing ahead here. You saw it last night when we played Milwaukee, and we put in Walker at the end. I mean, he had 4 fouls, I think.
Immediately. Now, he's guarding Giannis, which I couldn't imagine a worse player to try to come in and immediately guard. But yeah,
correct.
But in theory, Jarris is supposed to be that guy. He's the guy who, you can put next to Miles with the size, that's where Miles, obviously, is kind of his weak point, can guard the Tatums, the Browns, the LeBrons, the Giannis's, all those guys, which we love Nesmith. He's got a lot of size, but he's 6'6". You can't teach height. So it's one of those things. And it's one of those things where it's really great to be like, oh, we just got to go make the right deal. But it's, we heard last year, OG Anunoby's, quote unquote, asking price was 3 first rounders. It's like, are we ready to make the all in move? Siakam's 29 and is probably going to try to get a $250 million year because he's a free agent coming up this offseason. So are you ready to give him that money? He's on the timeline. It's kind of tough between, I think we're a little earlier in this rebuild than to be expected, even coming into this year, just based on how good Tyrese really is.
Yep.
And so you kind of want to capitalize, but there's a lot of questions. How much do you give up? If Jarris is the guy, do you really want to go all in on another wing? Because then you're just kind of blocking his
putting
spot.
him on the back burner.
Which we've seen when we, the Goga Batadze theory, when you just don't have minutes, even though. Yeah.
Well, and we got a little bit of that going on. I don't know. This is just total sidebar, but I was really impressed with Ben Shepherd's minutes last night. Mm-hmm. I mean, and he's bigger than I thought he was. I saw him guarding Dame at the end of the game because kudos to our second unit. They had to bring in, starters and, whatever. We had a chance. Shepherd actually blew a layup to cut it to single digits. But I'm only bringing that up in the context of we're very deep. We've got the best bench in the league. We know that statistically at least, and I think that's a pretty general consensus, amongst NBA followers. But we still, I don't think anybody believes we have a championship roster. So what, how do you continue to let the rebuild evolve somewhat organically? But you've got to capitalize on some of this momentum too, and that's the challenge for Kevin Pritchard and Chad Buchanan. That's I don't want to say it's near impossible, but that's why they're getting paid what they are, and that's why we're not. So good luck to them. We got to figure that out though. So anyways, I know we kind of probably want to bring this in for a landing on the in-season tournament. I don't know if you've got any closing thoughts or questions or something you kind of want to wrap this up with, but.
I've got one thought just on the in-season, kind of the charades of it all. The courts, I think, are cool until you are watching multiple games at once. There were multiple times where I had a couple TVs running with the Pacers and then the Sixers, and if you remember, the Sixers court is bright red. It is hard to watch two neon games at once. Your eyes, especially when it's different colors, bouncing from one TV to the other, does give you a little bit of a headache, but I don't even care. The jerseys, all that, it was all fun. It made you feel different, even though I thought it was a little weird that they introduced the city courts and the new courts, because we've got two new courts.
I was going to say, we have 3 courts now if you're a Pacers fan, and they're all fine. I mean, they're all great, but it was a little confusing, I'll say that, because it was city edition uniform, city court, IST court, whatever. Yep. I mean, I think overall, like I kind of close with a similar sentiment. I think it was extremely well done. I'm glad that they tried this. I will tell you, going into it, I was not, I don't want to say I was skeptical, but I was just kind of like, we'll see. I was not as excited, certainly, as I am now. Mm-hmm. And I think the biggest, set everything else aside, all the media, the courts, the bullshit, the coolest thing for me is that the players bought in.
Yep.
And you could tell that it meant something. I'm not even sure they knew what it meant, but they knew it was different, and they played like it was different.
Yep.
And I think the NBA I think now the bar has been set that this is different, that this matters, that this is something that you want to get up for and something you want to win. And so I think that bodes really well for this tournament going forward, and the impact that it can have on the league. The only other downside, and this is just the nature of the league, is you're opening the door to injuries and things like that. Thankfully, we didn't see a ton of that this year. Mm-hmm. But anytime guys, get these playoff-like atmospheres, and the only reason I bring that up is because I thought Andrew Nembhard blew his entire knee out.
Looked just like Jeremy Lamb.
Yeah,
I thought he was done.
I thought he was done. Thank God it sounds like that's not the case. It was a hyperextension. But, I mean, what else? Anything else you want to touch on?
No, I think you've hit it. One thing to credit is I think a lot of the star players like Tyrese, Tatum, Giannis, LeBron really cared, which in turn made everybody else care, because that's kind of one of the things with the regular season is we don't care because you watch James Harden's fat ass out there, and why would you care at times? So it's one of those things where when they cared, we got into it. I mean, we had a blast watching it, and I think it's one of those things where players next year even will probably be more motivated watching how much fun the Pacers had, the Bucks had, the Lakers had. Why wouldn't you want to go out there and be a part of that? It's a cool experience to be out in Vegas. So I think that's so. I'll leave you with one question, maybe, Brad. Yeah. Where do you think the Pacers grew the most from just the in-season tournament experience?
Yeah, I think if one thing sticks out to me, it's that we have shown that we can defend, at least situationally, enough to I mean, listen, we know we have the number 1 pace in the league. Teams are going to get more possessions against us, and they're going to score more points against us because of the possessions and pace at which we play. Yep. But you have to have good situational defense in big games, in playoff games. You have to be able to get those stops in order to close out tight games where everybody is at a level 10. Yep. And so I felt like the Boston and Milwaukee game proved to us that we could do that, particularly against some of the best teams and some of the best individual players, whether you're talking, Tatum and Brown or Giannis and Lillard. we were outmatched physically and from a physicality perspective. The Lakers were a bad matchup for us. Yeah. As much as you and I talked about, we want LeBron because it's LeBron. I can't stand LeBron, and he's beat us with wearing 5 different jerseys and over the span of 15 years. I mean, but it was just a bad matchup. But I think our biggest takeaway has to be that we have really strong individual defenders. We've shown a propensity to be able to communicate. Aaron Nesmith, I think, was the second rising star behind Haliburton. I mean, Haliburton stole the shine, but Nesmith, to me, and the fact that we locked him in for $11 million a year for the next 3 years.
Awesome deal.
The guy's shooting 40% plus from 3. He's a lockdown defender. I thought, LeBron gave him a little bit of trouble, but that's a pretty big size mismatch. I thought he did great on, when he can switch on to Lillard or Giannis or Tatum or Brown or whatever. So, yeah, what about you? I mean, that's kind of, for me, it's defense. So we're never going to be, we just got to be like 20th, not 29th, in order for us to get where we want to go. So what about you? What's your takeaway coming out of this tournament?
It's kind of on the same boat. I think it was just nice to prove we can beat the top teams in the East specifically in a stylistic game like the playoffs, kind of what I alluded to early, where it's a slower paced game, more defensive emphasis, just on that range. So it was cool to see we could take with them, we could hang with them, we could change our game, we could still be an offensive, a little bit slower team. Obviously, we want to run. That's where we make our runs. But even in the half-court offense, I still think Tyrese was picking people apart. His shifty drag feet, never set feet, step back is unguardable shot because you don't even know when he's going to take it. But
it's so awkward. Yeah, in a good way.
Oh, yeah. It's fantastic, and thank God. I mean, that's why he fell in the draft. But it was cool to see that against the top teams in the league, where they kept talking about the playoff atmosphere, which it did definitely, at least in Gamebridge, that first game we were at, definitely felt that. But I was even more curious just to see us in that style of game because I think it's no secret we have playoff expectations this year. I think one goal probably is to get 6 seed or above and avoid the play-in. We'll see. We're kind of right in that mix with a couple other teams, but it was a good showing to beat all the top guys.
Celtics, first overall in the East. Bucks, third overall. Mm-hmm. Sixers, fourth overall. I think we're fifth. Knicks are in there. Cavs and Hawks are right up there. So we beat, I know we didn't play the Knicks, but Celtics, Bucks, Sixers, Cavs, Hawks, all in playoff-type games.
Yep.
You have to feel really good about that. And so that's my takeaway. Excuse me. And, we'll see where the rest of the season goes. We're right back into regular season action. We're on a road trip. We got to take care of business, in Washington on Friday. Some interesting news coming out of there about relocation of the team and things like that. Still somewhat local, but out of D.C. Dive into all that. But this was awesome. It was a phenomenal experience as a Pacers fan, as an NBA fan, and appreciate you guys listening.